Hey everyone, if you've been keeping track of the Final Fantasy XIV live letters, the 55th one was this morning, and in it they included some job balance changes that they plan to implement in patch 5.1 about a week and a half from now. I was surprised to see that they actually have quite a few changes in store for Astrologian. These changes are somewhat vague, but I wanted to dedicate a video to speculating what exactly they mean and how they might affect the job going forward. Bear in mind that this is just information from a live letter, so it's absolutely subject to change. The first change they plan to make is to reduce Astro's MP consumption for spells. Astrologian has a ton of MP issues right now, to the point where there are a lot of situations where you have to choose between dealing damage and healing, simply because you don't have enough mana. Even when used on cooldown, Lightspeed alone generally can't compare to other healer mana management tools like Energy Drain, Aether Flow, Assize, and Thin Air. It's obvious that Astro needs a lot of help with mana, but the question is, how much help are they going to get? What I'm personally hoping for is a mana cost reduction to Malefic 4. If you're not providing any DPS as an Astro, then it's pretty much impossible to run out of mana. So, as a result, if you are running out of mana, then you're casting at least some Malefics. I'll admit that part of the reason I'm hoping for this specific change is that it would help me in particular. If you've watched any of my Astro gameplay, you've probably noticed that I contribute almost zero GCD healing, yet still run out of mana casting only offensive spells. However, I don't think this is the route they'll go with MP consumption. I think they'll continue to decrease the mana cost of Astrologian's GCD heals since it's more punishing to use them, compared to other classes. I think the only real candidates here are Benefic 2, Aspected Helios, and Helios. I imagine they'll tone down the mana cost of these abilities by 100 or 2. Perhaps we'll see Benefic 2 reduced from 900 mana to 700 or 800, and Aspected Helios and Helios down from 1100 and 900 mana to something more like 900 and 700 mana. I think if you're going to tone down the mana cost of heals, the change should be reasonably large, since in the big scheme of things we don't cast all that many heals. The mana changes I outline here would probably make less of a difference than taking only 50 mana off of Malefic 4, which I think would be better, but not something they're willing to do. The second proposed change is listed as Potency Adjustments. This is probably as vague as you can get. I don't think Astro's healing potencies are going to be adjusted. The class heals just fine as is, provided it has enough mana, and most of its healing potencies are exactly in line with White Mage. I think it would be strange to change anything here without good reason, and I don't think they have one. So let's assume we're getting damage adjustments, and that these adjustments will be buffs. There's only two real candidates here for buffs, and that's Malefic 4 and Combust 3. The question here is, how much of a boost does Astrologian need? I can make an entire video about this question, and if you're interested, I actually might in the future. The answer to this largely depends on how you'd like to see the healers balanced relative to each other going forward, and I don't want to get too much into that. Regardless of how you feel about this question, though, I feel it's reasonable to say that your average Astrologian and Savage would appreciate around a 500 DPS increase, and that other healers wouldn't really complain about a buff of this size. Pulling out some napkin math here, if you added 20 potency to Malefic 4 and 10 potency per tick to Combust 3, your average Savage rating Astra would see about a gain of 500 DPS. I don't think this is unreasonable, and still keeps these spells at a lower potency than their Scholar and White Mage counterparts. However, this is just my opinion on Astrologian's damage output, and I'm not on Square's balance team. So, what is Square actually going to do? Honestly, I think they'll do something similar. I think they realize that Astro isn't outputting as much DPS as they'd like, and there's only a couple of places you can add to their kit. I'm not sure how much DPS they feel is proper to add, but I imagine they'll do changes that are at least half as large as what I've outlined. Maybe they'll take Malefic 4 up to 250 potency, and Combust back up to 50 per tick. In the past year or so, Square has been pretty tentative with their balance changes, but the more recent buffs to Ninja and Samurai in patch 5.05 really impressed me, and this gives me a lot of hope that they might give Astro exactly as much help as it needs. The next thing on the adjustment slate is that Minor Arcana is going to be changed so that it gets rid of unnecessary steps. What I believe this means is that instead of drawing a card, then using Minor Arcana, and then playing a Lord or Lady on a party member, we'll now be able to simply target a party member, use Minor Arcana, and the card we have drawn will immediately be converted and played in one step. For example, if you draw a Balance, and then use a Minor Arcana on your Samurai, it'll give your Samurai a Lord of Crowns. This would be a pretty big deal, and would save us an OGCD every time we play a Minor Arcana. Playing a Minor Arcana would involve exactly the same amount of steps as playing a regular card. This is especially helpful during sleeve draw windows, and even more so if you don't have Lightspeed available. In a lot of situations, many of your sleeve draw cards get Minor Arcana'd. For example, if you Minor Arcana all 3 cards from sleeve draw, then it takes 3 usages of Minor Arcana, plus 3 usages of play to use all of these cards. If you don't have Lightspeed, this takes an obnoxious amount of time, usually around 15 seconds if you're weaving your cards in between your Malefics. However, this change would cut the time you need to dole out these cards in half. Basically, you'd be able to play cards as fast as you would if you had Lightspeed available. This is an awesome change. I've always hated that not having Lightspeed available would cripple your ability to sleeve draw. Lightspeed is meant for movement and saving mana, and using it to play cards feels awful. With this change, along with the earlier sleeve draw changes from patch 5.05, they finally managed to decouple Lightspeed and sleeve draw, which is incredible for the class. Finally, they plan on reworking how Collective Unconscious works for Astro. In particular, they plan on making the skill work differently depending on what sect you're in. For Diurnal Astro, the skill will remain largely the same. You'll get a brief damage reduction buff as well as a regen. However, for Nocturnal Astro, instead of a regen, you'll receive a buff that lasts for 20 seconds that reduces all damage you take by 10%. This change actually addresses an issue I've had with Nocturnal Astro for quite a while, and that's that Noct Astro has never really had an equivalent of a Scholar's Sacred Soil. Sure, Collective Unconscious comes with a flash of damage mitigation, but Astro has never had a tool that gives mitigation for an extended period of time. This weakness has made mitigation checks particularly difficult for White Mage Astro healer pairs in difficult fights like both Ultimates, Final Omega, and to an extent, Titan Savage. For difficult content, this change fixes a hole in Noct Astro's toolkit that typically holds them back. While losing the bubble regen may hurt Noct Astro a little bit, especially in easier fights that don't require much damage mitigation, I think this is an important step in the right direction for Noct Astro. All in all, each of these buffs are meaningful on their own, and together will do quite a bit to enable Astrologian to compete in the current healing meta. Currently, Astro is weak enough that players with only minimal White Mage experience can switch and pretty much immediately experience a gain. With these proposed changes, I expect this incentive to disappear. White Mage will remain stronger than Astrologian and will likely be at least as good at every single level of play, but the gap won't be large enough to incentivize Astro mains to pick up the cane. Thank you for listening to my thoughts. Regardless of whether you agree or disagree with me, feel free to leave a comment with what you think will happen in the future. If you enjoyed listening to me ramble, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you all again soon.